This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Samply, and Isotope. You're hearing my voice right now on the Spectra 1964 STX 100 mic pre through Isotope, RX, and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
First, I read what the story of the game is going to be. I figure out exactly like who our heroes are, who our villains are, and then I get the zones. I take the zone and I take the story and I put it all kind of together in my head and figure out like what's the feel for the song, what's the mood of this particular composition.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Want to know how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars? Well, I've been cheating all along by using Isotope, RX, and Ozone on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing RX declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, EQ, and limiting on this podcast episode. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Before your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs and notes in one place. But setting up a shared cloud folder can be frustrating. There's always someone in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Samply.app makes it easy to add collaborators to a project so that the whole band can upload new songs and make comments before the session. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music. Just upload a voice memo or song and start commenting. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samply.app or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. Howdy Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jay Lauterwasser, a video game sound designer and music composer for Darkpaw games in San Diego, California. Also a long-time friend of mine and original bandmate as well, which we can talk about more. I'm going to read Jay's intro that he sent me too, because it kind of tells the story pretty cool. So, quote, I'm quoting Jay here. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, moved to San Diego in 2004 and started my career in the video game industry in quality assurance. In 2016, I got my opportunity to become a sound designer. And then in 2019, I added music composer to my job description. I've been a musician for the better part of my life, started playing bass in high school, joined a band after graduating, and got to see the eastern half of the country from the backseat of the tour van. We'll talk more about that. Even though the touring slowed down, I never stopped playing music. I still play bass in the local San Diego band Roger and sit in for the occasional recording session. I've been part of countless recording sessions as a musician, but never officially trained as an engineer. Fortunately, I've worked with a bunch of great engineers that were always willing to answer questions and explain something along the way. And it was from those experiences and further exploration and research that taught me enough about sound engineering to be able to do sound design for video games. Music composition was the natural next step, taking what I learned about audio engineering and sound in general and adding the musician side to it. After taking a couple of online music composition and theory classes, I was able to compose and produce my first video game soundtrack in 2019, so recently, for the game EverQuest Claws of Veeshan. And then there's more. I think you've gone on to do EverQuest too, and we've got a playlist in the show notes. This one's actually a SoundCloud playlist, Rockstars, but we've got a link there so you can go check out some of these some of the music that Jay's composed for the video games. Very cool. And then, of course, it was a lot of fun for me to just kind of Google on YouTube about the game itself and see people playing it and hear the music in the background. So please welcome Jay Lauterwasser to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jay AKA Junior. Are you ready to rock, dude?
Let's rock this.
Awesome. So thanks for sending your intro and everything. That was cool to read that actually and learn more about how you got into the video game stuff. Now, you and I know each other going way back. So tell us in your own words, how did you start out playing music? And, what was the first stuff that, why do we know each other?
So I kind of happened on music just kind of naturally as a kid, kind of learning as I could on an acoustic guitar and a piano. Come high school, my jazz band, a bunch of friends I had were in the jazz band and they needed a bass player, and I was like, yeah, I'll give it a try. So I took the bass home, learned a couple of scales, came back in, and was officially in the jazz band. And after that, I just kind of picked bass as my instrument. Graduated high school, pretty much right out of high school, ended up in a band with you. Well, not exactly with you, not right at the same time, but anyways, you might want to marker all this.
No, this is good, man. This is good. So, St. Louis, of course, is where we know each other from, and that particular band is called Enormous Richard, which is what happens when you name your band. When somebody names your band drunk during college one day, you end up with free beer or Enormous Richard, one of the two.
Right.
But remind me again. So we had Joe was playing bass with us at first, and then you stepped in for Joe, but I forgot the exact timing. Was it at the point that I took off and went to Hong Kong to go play music?
You had just left for Hong Kong, I think a few weeks before I kind of jumped into the band after Joe. Something like that. Yeah. It's all kind of hazy.
It's all hazy at this point, which means that it was a really good tour.
Yeah.
So we were playing music together, and then I think you stayed in St. Louis and you started playing in some kind of indie rock bands and stuff like that back when that craze was really booming in the 90s as well. And I guess we faded a little bit as Enormous Richard. But you and I had a chance to get back together again and make another record with Sean McGovern a few years ago. That was a lot of fun, man. You came to my place here in Nashville and we did the record Moonshine, which we can include a link to that as well, Rockstars, in the show notes.
We should.
But you've been out. When did you move out to California?
2004, I came out
here.
Right.
Oh, that's right. I just said that in your intro, didn't I?
It's okay.
That's cool. That's why I get to ask the questions.
Sure.
And so then, you've been continuing to play music and everything. I got tons of questions because I really don't know shit about game composition.
Sure.
And it's really cool to discover it for me. It's very exciting. It's just an entire world. But talk more about that. Talk a little bit about your transition into composition for games and, even like taking courses to learn how to do that stuff.
Sure. As far as the composition side of it, it was my boss was doing the music for EverQuest too, and I got to watch him over the shoulder as he was doing it, and it just all made sense to me. And I was like, oh, I think I could do something like that. And essentially, I bought a bunch of music libraries and just started playing with it on my own, like MIDI music libraries, and learned enough to get me started. And I took a couple of Udemy courses, and they were pretty like high level. Like it wasn't really in depth, but gave me enough to start with. Like it gave me a start as far as like how to even start to think about composing music. The thing about composing music is it all starts with a story. And I never really thought of it that way. And that was one of the things I kind of got out of my classes as far as like the beginning of composing music.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? So, literally there's a story in the game, but,
well, even going back to like symphonic music, like there's a reason you get the program, and the program usually will have a story. Like, I mean, this is like a Mozart piece or a Beethoven piece, and it always starts with a story.
Yeah. And then does that, when you say story, you mean like a literal story? Like, there's a, Little Red Riding Hood is carrying a basket through the forest and a wolf comes up to her, that kind of story?
Correct. Yeah. Like a little more abstract than that, but yes, exactly. Like you have your themes, and your themes could be the hero.
Yeah.
Or you can have your themes that are the villain.
I like to ask guests on the podcast to share an inspirational quote, or even just talk about, anybody that sort of inspired them along the way. Was there anything that comes to mind for you for that, as with regards to the music composition or music in general, or the games? Anybody that really inspired you on your path to figuring this stuff out?
There is. There's a handful of people, really. And the one thing that I've kind of gotten the same thing from that handful of people is just use your ears, listen.
Yeah.
Music. This is sound design as well. Like all of it, just like listen.
Yeah.
When you're in a band, you listen. Don't. Yeah.
It's so easy to just start playing what we think we hear in our head and forget to listen to the rest of the music that's going on.
Right.
How does that apply to the music composition? I mean, what is there to listen to? Do you start with the theme? Like, you've got this collection of songs that you did for EverQuest, and they're all very cool, and they're very symphonic. There's a lot of strings and timpani drums and things like that, and they're just very expressive in that kind of film composition genre. But do you start out with like a musical motif and then build it from there? Like, what are some of the things? What would be the first thing that you would do that you would sort of listen to yourself?
So it's kind of a natural thing. I first, like with the EverQuest music, first I read like what the story of the game is going to be. And I figure out exactly like who our heroes are, who our villains are, and then I get like the zones, the places that the players will play in, and I get to see those and know that these characters are going to be in this zone. So I can then kind of take, I take the zone and I take the story and I put it all together in my head and figure out like what's the feel for the song, what's the mood of this particular composition, and really at that point, and sometimes I'll have the game run in and I'll like just kind of be sitting in the zone watching like everything kind of happen, and sometimes I just kind of have a mental picture, and there's times that I'll just kind of sit with the piano and I'll just start playing chord patterns. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that chord pattern feels good. And then the kind of the motif will come after that. Or sometimes there's times that there's action, and the action will call for, I'll feel the motif, I'll feel the melody just because of the action. And I'll write that. And then I'll figure out the chord patterns behind it later on.
So when you say you watch the game sort of playing, does a game just sort of have a demo mode that you can just watch while you're playing? Or, how do you play a game and compose at the same time? Or am I thinking about it wrong?
Not really. Sometimes I capture video of it, and I'll have the video running in my DAW while I'm playing. Or sometimes I have the game running on a second machine, and I have my own personal like local servers that I can run and things like that. As far as the nitty gritty of game development, I'm not reliant on like other people's games. I can run my own and not worry about messing with any other designers or whatnot when I'm doing it.
Right on. The Spectra 1964 STX100 mic pre provides unequaled headroom and linear output regardless of transient audio peaks, capturing critical details from your microphone. The 100 series amplifiers were used by Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, and the Record Plant on records by ZZ Top, Aerosmith, and John Lennon. Now you can get that same incredible sound in your studio at Spectra1964.com or call them at 801-797-0642. In my studio, I've got the Mac Mini M1 paired up with the OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expansion solution to connect to all my dedicated audio drives, sample libraries, and backup drives. It's the perfect size to stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or older Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Okay, very cool. So you've got a visual cue while you're in the creative mindset and you're thinking about composing and stuff. You mentioned like action scenes and different moods. Are there certain instruments that you definitely are going to use for composition? I mean, how do you even determine what instruments you want to work with as a palette?
Sometimes it's mood. Like if it's like a high energy action kind of situation, there'll be a lot of brass. If you really want to make it feel something, you can like use the strings. That's kind of what I've kind of discovered. More so on my own. It was kind of covered in some of the classes I took, but they didn't get too deep into that. Honestly, what's funny is lately, key is kind of determining what instruments I use. Like if I write something in a certain key, sometimes I'll use that to, maybe I'll make the brass or make a French horn the lead of this song, or this is perfect for a cello.
Because of the key that determines where the range is for that instrument. Yeah, well,
and
of course,
if it doesn't work, I just change the key.
As we all know, D minor, of course, is the saddest of all keys.
Right.
All right, cool. Well, so and then are there certain instruments that would sort of only make an appearance in an action scene? I mean, you mentioned the brass as being intense, but are there like percussion instruments and things that only come, like, do you only introduce rhythm when you've got action and, things like that?
No, not necessarily. There's, I introduce rhythm if I feel like it just needs to keep moving sometimes.
Yeah. And then you've got all these different scenes in the game. So you're like in a different place. You're out on a field, or you're in a castle, or you're
right.
What do they call the place where you just hang out for a minute and you upgrade your character and buy more swords and all that?
Usually that's called the lobby.
The lobby. Okay. And the lobby gets its own music too? Sometimes.
Yeah. We have since the games I work on, one of the games is 22 years old and the other game is 16 years old. And I am one of many, many composers and one of many, many sound designers that have worked on these games. I'm just more responsible for the last, 2 to 4 years of stuff. As far as the last couple of years of music and the last six years of sound design or so.
So it's not like a movie where the movie gets made and once it's released, it's done. It's more like Pro Tools where it's this, you just keep adding features and adding stuff to it. It's still Pro Tools, but it's evolved over 20 years.
Down to the subscription service.
That's right. Right. You probably have a subscription service for video games too, don't you?
We do. Like our video games are living. There's no end. Like there's end to the stories. Like every year we release we call them expansions. And that's what I've been doing the music for, is the expansions.
Okay.
we release the expansions, and the expansions essentially is like an add-on to the game. It's like more places to go, more things to fight, more stories to discover. And each expansion in itself is a wrapped up story. A lot of times they've been doing it to where it'll lead into the next one, because we're always preparing to do the next year's expansion.
Okay. Now, I'm also looking at the songs in your SoundCloud, and I guess they're varying lengths, aren't they? Is there anything that determines how long a particular piece needs to be? And then I guess give us an introduction a little bit into like the mechanics of how music goes together with video games, and how is this different from making a record in the studio with a band, for example?
This is an interesting question to answer, because with our games being so old, we don't really have a music engine. Being as I can't put in stems and have the engine play the stems at certain points of time. With our games, it's you enter. I set up an area that a player walks into, and when that player walks into that invisible area, the song will play. Mm-hmm. So as far as length, there really isn't. I don't really have a hard set rule on length of songs, because the songs will play in and out as the characters go throughout these areas. In the more modern games, and I really, again, this is one of those places where I know enough to just get myself in trouble. But we have engines, we have sound engines that I can layer in stems of songs. So like I can really layer in just the string stems, and I can separate the brass stems and the percussion stems. And I can tell the game to, okay, when the action starts ramping up, start bringing up the brass in this song. Or if the action is ramping down and we're getting to more like kind of emotional part, let's ramp up the strings. If things are starting to get really hectic, let's go ahead and ramp up the percussion.
Yeah, let's turn the tambourine way up.
Right, exactly. Exactly. More cowbell.
More cowbell, exactly.
So that's how the newer engines are working, and I had a chance to kind of play with those engines in a game earlier on that never saw the light of day, and it was eye-opening. I was like, oh, neat! So the game can actually mix the song for you based on what the player is doing.
Now, what would it take? When you've got a game, a legacy game like this, is that how you would refer to this? As EverQuest is a legacy game? It's been around for a while.
Yes.
Would it be the kind of thing where you can put it into a new system of game, or you really have to redesign it at that point? You have to like start from scratch and rebuild all kinds of things?
With the way these games were built, because these games were built so long ago, EverQuest itself was one of the first MMORPGs. I can't remember what MMORPG stands
there
for
goes
anymore.
My question. What's MMORPG? Mamarpa.
Massive multiplayer role-playing game.
Online. It must be online. Yeah. Okay.
Online. EverQuest was one of the first to do that. Now we have, like 22 years later, we have hundreds of them out there. Some that are a lot more, even more popular than EverQuest. Mm-hmm. But because it was one of the first, and EverQuest 2 is also kind of in this playing field, they didn't design it with the thinking that we were going to have this technology now. And because of that, it would cost a lot of money to retrofit a new sound engine into these games.
Yeah. Okay.
I would love to. I have championed to do it, but it just won't happen.
Yeah. Well, there's future games. I'm sure. Well, so that's very cool. So the newer stuff will allow you to sort of create stems of the music, and then it will mix the music for you essentially, and kind of compose different levels of intensity of the music and the song depending on what's going on the screen.
Yes, yes.
Now, what about things like immersive audio? And, a lot of people are talking about creating Atmos mixes for music. Apple, of course, has moved on to include a whole catalog of Atmos mixed music, and you can hear it in headphones or you can hear it on fancy speaker sets. In your experience, are people talking about that in the game music composition world too? And is that, I'm sure in the game itself, of course, if you turn your head, especially if it was a VR thing, the sound is going to move around. But I wonder if that happens with the music as well.
Nah, it can happen with the music. It's not, it would happen if you have the music, like if you have like a band of orcs playing in a corner, you can have the music coming from that place.
You mean like band as in like drums, bass, guitar? Orcs?
Exactly. We've done that.
What kind of music did they play?
Almost klezmer music.
Oh man, that's great. All right.
We had fun. I was part of that recording. I actually played bass and acoustic guitar. My boss did some recordings for one of those, and it was a lot of fun.
That sounds awesome, man. Okay, so let's see. What other questions do I need to ask you about this? One thing that I did notice is there was a real consistency to the instrumentation from piece to piece. The songs have different moods, but they're not like vastly dissimilar. And it occurred to me that that's probably very intentional.
Yes, yeah, it is. For a couple of reasons. It's artistically, it's kind of intentional for me because I like to have it like, I look at the soundtracks as I come at it from a band point of view almost. I look at the soundtracks as an album or a symphony. I don't know if that's technically what a symphony is, but I look at it as an album. So I want every song that's on this to kind of flow in and out of each other, to have like a connective tissue. The same goes with the motifs. Like I kind of did the same thing. There is kind of a running diminished minor kind of motif that runs between all the songs.
Okay. And then you mentioned the characters, and it reminds me of, you watch Star Wars, for example, and every character has its own theme song.
Perfect example.
Which is such a great effect. And I guess that's something that you would similarly do for this. Now, how would a character introduce an element to the music? Because what if you switch characters? Is it a totally new composition that you're going to hear?
No, not always. And I have yet to really do this yet with a purpose. And I want to. That's one of my next things I want to do as far as growing. You can introduce, unfortunately, I kind of go to the theory side of it and I start thinking about how I can work with that. Mm-hmm. You would like, let's say you have a minor motif. You can introduce like a second motif into it, like a counter motif or something along those lines if you want to introduce a second character within a scene.
Okay.
That's my layman's way of thinking of how to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose with the future sound engines, you could have certain stems could be related to a character and have different personalities. Maybe one's like a banjo of the theme and something else is a metal guitar or something like that.
Right.
Depending on who the character is.
This character is a bassoon.
Which one, you? Personally?
I have no.
Hey, you know what they say about bassoon? Because when my daughter was in grade school and the kids were starting to pick their instruments, or in middle school, actually, another mom came up and said her daughter had picked bassoon. And she told me, she's like, well, you know what they say about bassoon? The reeds are expensive, but college is free. I was like, oh, that's cool. I had no idea that they said that about bassoon. And video game composition as well, just cool. Yes. All right, so let's see. Here's some of the titles for these. We've got Maiden's Eye Enslaved, Return to Vexthal, Basilica of Adumbration, Shadow Valley, Umbral Plains Reclaimed. Tell us some more stories about these different scenes and, what sort of places you actually are looking at in a game that you're then having to come up with something that matches that musically.
Oh boy. Because I've already started on the next thing, I've kind of already put this stuff away. So like Maiden's Eye is each song is based on an area of the game, an area of the game where things happen, and so like Basilica. Oh boy, I'm trying to keep my lore straight now.
Well, it's all right. I mean, we can talk about it in a general sense. It doesn't have to be uber specific. Sure.
Like Basilica is a dungeon, but it's a home for one of the main groups, in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Where Maiden's Eye is an outside kind of world, outside kind of area.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I probably should point out that all these areas are on a moon above the main game.
Of course they are. Of course it might be. Oh, because you mentioned it was an expansion pack, so this could be like a new part of the game where you go to this moon or something like that?
Yes, exactly. It's exactly what it is. It's like a whole new area that you go to from the last 22 years of areas that people have gone to.
So now, did you have to incorporate musical themes that already existed in the game as well and sort of port them up to this moon, and where, there's a thread of consistency in that respect?
This year I did not. The last year's, the 2019 one, I actually did take some of the themes from the music from earlier places in the game and kind of worked with those themes. But this year it was all 100% new.
Okay. All right, cool. If you're ready to discover the secrets to making your mixes sound great no matter what your studio situation, then check out my free mixing course, mixmasterbundle.com, where I show you how to get great sounding mixes in your studio using simple techniques and free plugins. And when you're ready for more advanced studio skills, then check out recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, where you can learn from Grammy-winning teachers to help you record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever. Use the code Rockstar right now at checkout for 10% off any course for a limited time. Let's talk a little bit about your studio. Let's break it down for the rock stars. Like, you're in your studio now?
I'm in my at-home studio,
okay,
my COVID studio.
Well, describe that to us, and then also describe your not at-home studio. Like, what is a studio for game composition and what you do?
Well, my at-home studio is very thrown together. I have my Roland 880 keyboard controller, a computer. I run a Reaper as my DAW.
Is that are you on PC or Mac?
PC.
Okay.
As far as music composition, I run Reaper. I run here at home. I'm running everything through a Scarlett One IA18IN.
Okay.
I've got that number wrong, but
so what's some of the stuff that you dig about Reaper? Like, what made you choose that as your DAW, your workstation?
I learned on Pro Tools, and I liked Pro Tools, but Pro Tools got a little cumbersome on trying to keep up with it, as far as like where I was kind of coming from and kind of the low level of where I'm coming from, I guess.
Right. You felt like you didn't need the super advanced stuff that
I didn't need well, it's not even, I didn't even need the super advanced stuff. I chose Reaper because it felt like it could do everything that I needed to do, and it was cheap. And I liked the fact that it was open source. And that made it really easy to find answers to questions if I ran into something, or if I wanted to do something. It was easier for me to find answers, like how do I sidechain, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that Reaper is very flexible and it can do quite a lot of stuff. I mean, there are features in there that kind of blew me away. So, for example, at one point I was trying to figure out if you have a portable voice recorder, a lot of times they'll have a thing where you can drop a marker. So if I was going to do a portable interview somewhere and I wanted to put markers in,
Sure.
How would I get those markers into Pro Tools later? Reaper has a feature that it will actually extract those markers and then turn them into markers on the timeline and then export that as MIDI, which you can then bring into Pro Tools and actually have markers in your Pro Tools session. And I thought that was really cool. But some of those, getting answers to some of those things it'd be hard to figure it out on your own. So it's definitely cool to have forums where you can go find answers to stuff.
Yeah. The whole open source thing I've always thought that was a neat idea, even since, back in the days of just getting into computers and whatnot, the days of Napster.
Right. Are you, did you learn how to code yourself as well? I mean, do you know how to get into the back end of stuff, or do you just feel fairly computer savvy in general?
I'm relatively computer savvy in general. I know enough about coding to really get myself in trouble in the background. I know enough if I get stuck on something, I can start digging through things to find answers. I'm not confident enough to start building anything on my own.
Okay. Let me see. So with Reaper, you're using a lot of virtual instruments. Is that really your main tool of composition?
Yes. Yeah. I use a Contact primarily.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about Contact. So what is it?
Contact is kind of a shell for the virtual instruments.
Okay.
I don't know how to explain Contact. It's a plugin I use.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So you use Contact primarily for composition. And, I use it a little bit, but not a ton. But I think, as I understand, it's this shell you can use to play back instruments. And then you can just buy different instruments that you load up into it. And then it's got tons of stuff in the one plugin.
Yes.
What are some things as far as virtual instruments that you've found to be really useful? I mean, do you have to have 5 bazillion terabytes of sounds somewhere, or is it not that complex?
You don't. It's nice. It's always nice to have those toys, but you don't have to have that. I'm probably running about 1.5 terabytes at this point, and I would say that I use 25% of it.
Okay, so the things that we hear in your composition, strings and timpanis and brass and everything, those are essentially sample-based instruments?
Yes.
Okay. And then what about things like the computer requirement? Like, how powerful of a computer do you need to be able to... Well, let me ask it to you this way. Have you ever tried to do all this stuff on a computer that just sucked?
I started doing all this stuff on a computer that just sucked.
Okay. Talk about that experience and then getting that worked out.
It just sucked. It was slow. It's just a matter of you first off, you deal with latency issues. You can't, when you have a slower computer, you can't get the latency in a place that's comfortable, because I do a lot of live time playing before I go in and fix MIDI.
So what is that? What does that mean by getting the latency in a place where you're comfortable? You're talking about a setting within Reaper.
Yes. Essentially, the time it takes the note to play after you play the note.
Right. So you hit the key on the keyboard and then it happens a moment later out of the speakers.
Right. With the older machines, you can't really dial that in too well.
Right.
With the older machines, depending on memory, you're one of my compositions could easily take 15 minutes to load on an older computer.
Wow.
Now I've got it down to about 5 minutes, but I have 64 gigs of memory and I have all my libraries on an SSD drive.
Wow. And it still takes 5 minutes to load it up because that's just the time it takes to find those samples on the drive and load them up into the virtual instruments, the players?
Yes.
So when you are doing a composition, do you like to leave the virtual instrument, like, leave it as a MIDI track where it's actually playing that? Or do you find that it makes sense to quickly commit those tracks to audio somehow? And does Reaper let you do that sort of thing?
Reaper, I can totally stem everything out with Reaper. I can stem out each instrument separately, but I don't. I leave it all as MIDI, just because I like the power. I like once you commit it to a wave, you can't do anything with it. It's the way it is, and I like having the MIDI to, like, after even after like working on it for 40 hours, I'll come back and start doing like editing, and I'll start hearing, oh wait, there's like conflicting notes between the strings and the woodwinds. So I need to go in and actually fix those. And once it's a wave, I can't fix any of those.
Right. So it gives you that flexibility. With the editing, can you sort of zoom out when you're editing MIDI in Reaper and just kind of move big chunks around? Or do you mostly have to get in close and, make sure you're carefully copying each note and that sort of thing?
Both. Like you could do both. You could do it large chunks at a time, or you can go in and do the minutia. Everything's on a click track. I mean, with everything on a click track, everything's gridded out. Everything has to be gridded out because, like, you have your legatos on your strings. When a violin hits, the first note isn't going to be the first sound you hear isn't going to be the strongest sound.
Right.
And you want your stronger sound to be closer to where the one is.
So you have to start a little early.
You have to start it a little early, and then I can actually go in and mess with how hard do I want the legato to hit, or how I can fade it. I can fade the legato in, or I can actually like fade in the intensity of it.
Do you use any manual controllers as part of your MIDI controller to help with that stuff? Like, I mean, you got the keys. Do you use the sustain pedal? Is that an important part of doing what you're doing? The sustain pedal is an important part for me as far as the writing side of it, but I actually strip it out after I'm done. Oh, really? And you manually just sort of write the lengths of things?
And then I manually write the lengths of things. I have on my keyboard itself, I do have knobs and levers, and I can assign those. And I sometimes will actually perform with those. But a lot of times I go back in and I'll clean it up.
Yeah, knobs and levers, of course, man. I mean, like, because if a bunch of orcs were composing on your keyboard, I mean, they want old wooden knobs and levers, right?
Exactly.
For MIDI controllers.
I got to keep in the mindset.
OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to stack with the Mac Mini, and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB-equipped computers and devices. With a SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect to millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. I'm using the Mini Stack STX paired with my Mac Mini M1 to house my dedicated audio SSD and sample libraries at my studio, and it works great. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. The STX 100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX 100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX 100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX 600 modules, combining the STX 100 mic pre and C610 into a single 500 module. Now you can get the same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's BBDI and complementers. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. Hey, Rockstars. It's Lid Shaw. We're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Jay Lauterwasser, joining us from San Diego, California. Sunny San Diego. Jay, you ready to jam, dude?
Let's jam.
All right. So let's see. I thought I was going to jump right into a question. Then I realized I didn't know what I was going to ask next. Let me ask you more about the game that you're working with too. So EverQuest, what is the game? What is it? And have you played the full thing front to back, or is that am I thinking about it wrong?
No, you can kind of play it front to back, but I have not. The funny thing about EverQuest is I actually started playing EverQuest in 1998.
Oh wow! So you knew what it was all about.
Yeah, I actually played EverQuest before it was even released. I was part of the betas of it, and it's a fantasy driven game. Orcs, elves, magic, good gods, bad gods. Everything you can think of. After 22 years of stories, I think they've kind of hit on everything.
Yeah. All right. So then you go through and you have this big adventure and you go to different parts of it. What is some of the stuff about a game like that you think it makes it really fun?
Accomplishing. You're constantly accomplishing things. There's a social aspect of the game because it's online. You play with other people. People have made friendships that have lasted over the years. People have been married in the game from meeting each other in the game.
Really?
Oh yeah.
And they have a wedding on the game itself, and it's their wedding.
Yes.
Amazing.
They used to have conventions all the time where everyone would meet in Vegas of all places, and everyone would meet for a long weekend. So there's a very big social side of it. That's why people keep coming back, I think.
Yeah. And do people get real serious about the outfits and the costumes and all that kind of stuff as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally.
That sounds fun. Are there bands that actually will, speaking of which, I noticed on the website for EverQuest, one of the items that they had there for swag was you could get a 120 gram vinyl copy of the soundtrack.
That's the original soundtrack. Yes.
Oh, the original. Okay. So it's not, they haven't got to the point where they're pressing vinyl for yours yet.
We're not pressing vinyl for mine. I'm just now starting. One day, maybe. Actually, my goal is what I want to do before even vinyl is I want to send scores to an actual orchestra and have an actual orchestra play my stuff.
Oh, that would be amazing, dude. That would be amazing. Have you thought about where and how you want to do that? Have you already chosen the studio and the orchestra and everything like that?
I haven't gone that far by any means, but I know where to start. And then you start in Eastern Europe.
Right. Yeah. You go to Prague, for example.
Yes, because they're cheap.
I saw the Prague Orchestra when I was traveling there, and it was incredible. It was like $3 to get a ticket, I think.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty amazing. Okay. And I think some of the string libraries actually go there to do their samples. Maybe it was, I don't know, I don't want to get this wrong, but East-West
That sounds
example,
right.
that sort of thing.
Yeah. I know the two strings I use, one is the MGM strings, or the MGM orchestra done in the MGM studios, and then the other is the BBC orchestra that they recorded in Abbey Road.
Oh, wow. And those are the two libraries that you really use a lot?
Yeah, those are the two libraries I definitely gravitate towards.
Okay, cool. So now, what about looping? How important is it for songs to loop? Do you have to think about it in that fashion, or is that sort of easy? Does it just sort of feather in and feather out? And do your songs actually loop when you're on these levels and playing it?
My stuff does not loop. I thought about getting it to a looping point, but I don't necessarily need to with EverQuest. New games, yes, you have to worry about looping, or at least giving opportunities to be able to like fade songs in and out of each other without any concatenated notes or anything.
Okay, so does that mean that with this game, somebody's already gone on to a new level before your song finished playing, and so you don't have to worry about looping? Or does that mean it just loops it and it just starts your song over if you're still on the same level?
It just starts the song over. There'll be like a small pause.
Okay, all right. But it just sounds like a normal start the song over.
Yes. Yeah. One of the biggest roadblocks for me as far as getting true looping music in EverQuest is you can't truly loop an MP3, and all our music is an MP3.
Okay, interesting.
There's something at the MP3. I found software that kind of does it, but I still hear a click when it happens. But for some reason with the compression of MP3s, you can't get a true loop.
Okay, interesting. I know you can pull an MP3 into different workstations and set up a loop, but I guess that's missing the point. It needs to be able to do it with the game engine.
Yeah, seamlessly. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about your compositional thinking. So when I listen to some of this stuff, I hear some pretty cool things. There was one of the ones where it kind of got to the end and then it breaks down into harp. And, you seem to have this sort of breakdown effect. And then there was stuff where like you might hear an instrument start to do a motif and then it's kind of joined by other instruments and joined by the strings and it swells to get bigger and stuff. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, like what are some of the methods that you find you use a lot when you're just creating the music around this?
Keeping in mind the chords, the not the chords, but the other. How to answer that? It just kind of happens.
All right, that's fair.
Sometimes if I'm playing a motif and I want to like make it stronger, I'll add like thirds or a fifth, or if I want to make it like if I want to add give it a little tension, I can add like a seventh, mm-hmm. or sometimes depending on if you're a major or minor, a sixth. I think I'm saying that right.
That's good enough for me.
Again, I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's all right, man. That's what's cool about your story too, is, you just go from the playing in a band thing to deciding you're going to do music for video games. And now your music is in the games, it's pretty cool. And then, you talked a little bit about the instrumentation. What are some of the instruments that make up the orchestra that you would typically use?
The full strings, so violin 1 and 2, viola, which has turned into one of my favorite instruments, just because of the timbre of it. There's something about the viola I really like to use. And then cellos and basses, of course. So like the full strings, full woodwinds. I usually use a lot of flutes and clarinets and oboes. Sometimes I bring in bassoons. It depends on how dark I want something to feel, typically. Horns, I use a lot of French horns. I've started using some English horns lately.
What's the difference between those two? How would you describe the sound difference between English and French horns?
English horn has a higher timbre. As far as my ear catches, it has like a higher timbre, which gives it a different kind of attack.
Mm-hmm.
A more metallic attack, I guess, where I feel like a French horn is a little warmer.
Okay. That stuff is so much fun. I mean, I'm really jealous, to be honest. I love the idea of composing that way. I mean, composing with a band in the studio is similar because you think about like, well, what's the bass part? What's this guitar part? You know, if I'm going to double a guitar, should I double it an octave up, or should I, add a thin, reedy fuzz guitar sound to this line? And I feel like, music, orchestral composition has been doing that forever,
Yeah.
and that's what it's all about. And you sort of add things to lines, and it's cool, the idea of replaying the same melodic parts, but just changing what stack of instruments happens. It's actually one of the reasons why I always thought Muzak was really cool when I would hear it play over the speakers. Because I was like, that's so cool the way they did that, Everybody thinks it's super cheesy, but I was just like, that sounds like fun to me.
Right, exactly.
I don't even know what Muzak is these days, but, we, of course, had it in the elevators and over the grocery store speakers when we were growing up.
Right.
What do you feel like are some of the things you've learned about music and songs and composition, that you understand today compared to when you started out playing in a band and when you started playing in Enormous Richard, for example?
Oh, geez. Everything. Frequencies. The place, how to look at everything, how to look at the music as a whole, as like frequencies. The bass obviously is your bass frequencies, your guitars, but then you have your guitars, which can be kind of your mid frequencies and your high frequencies. And if you want things to stand out or not stand out, you blend. You can play with play with your EQ and blend things that way. I'm not sure if what I'm saying is making sense.
No, it is. I mean, I remember that one of the things that I felt like you begin to learn as you start to understand this idea of, if the guitar is in the same voicing range as the vocal, it can compete with the vocal. And I sort of didn't understand what that really meant at the beginning. But
right.
It's a combination of what you're saying, which is like there can be a tonality to it that's competing, but it can also just be the note choice and the actual harmonic range that you're playing your melody in.
Right. When you take it to like the orchestral level, you're just, adding so many more tones and frequencies and sounds that you kind of have to like pay attention to it more.
Yeah. Do you find yourself sometimes, like, have you ever done compositions where you thought you were coming up with all these badass parts, and then you get to the end, you're like, oh my God, that just sounds like a pile of shit?
Oh yeah, all the time. There's many times that I'll like do something and I'll walk out of my studio and talk to my wife and and let her know, I'm like, I just worked 40 hours on this and I think now I have to polish a turd.
Yeah.
And then I start really getting into it. And it's like you start listening to it and going with the whole frequency thing or the whole tone and whatnot. You start subtracting things. And suddenly stuff will take shape. Like you give things room to breathe. Mm-hmm. I guess that's another one of the things I've kind of learned over the years that I had no idea back in the Enormous Richard days is sometimes the loudest note you play is no note at all.
Yeah. Well, especially with bass, it's taken me ages to understand that about bass, is that bass is very powerful because it's a very big energy of the note. And without the space in between the notes don't have any power. So it needs that attack to the note. It needs that space before the note happens to give you the sense of, wow, something big just happened.
Right. And orchestral music is that times 6.
Times 6. That's funny. I wouldn't have had any idea what number to pick. Why 6?
It was arbitrary.
Okay. I thought that was like an exact number of instrumentation or something. So So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you on Instagram about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version are they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply.app comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming high-quality mixes so your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or a computer back in the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and everything is easy to find in one location. No more mixed-up mix messages from the band. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music, and it all works in your browser with no downloads required. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samply.app and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade. Have you ever wished you could remove the click track bleed from a singer's vocal mic, the sound of shuffling feet from a full choir, or clicking noises from the valves of an otherwise brilliant trumpet solo? These are just some of the incredible things I've been able to clean up, edit, or remove from a recording using the magic of iZotope RX. Great for mixing with a collection of plugins for your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks with a set it and forget it simplicity that lets you focus on your creativity in the studio while you let iZotope handle the audio challenges. If you've ever wanted to truly feel like a magician in the studio, then iZotope RX is your magic wand. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Okay, cool. So, talk about doing the career of music making. Oh, and no, let's talk about sound design too. I didn't even mean for those to be separate things. I mean, to me, it's all making music and sound for video games, but maybe in your mind, they're totally separate topics. So what is sound design versus composition?
Actually, to me, you're right. To me, it's all the same. I approach sound design the same way I approach writing a song. Instead of using instruments, I'm using sounds. Like for creatures and characters, I use a lot of bears, a lot of pigs, a lot of things like that. And you could take those sounds and you can actually morph them. Like one of my favorite plugin suites to use is Sound Tools.
Sound Toys.
Yeah.
Sound Toys. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I love Sound Toys because I love using it for rock music too. I haven't used it yet for except for Little Plate for orchestral stuff, but I use
Little Plate is awesome.
Lot of the sound. Oh, it is one of my favorite plates. But I use Sound Toys a lot for sound design, a lot of the modulation and things like that. But yeah, like if I'm handed a character and I'm saying, here, this is going to need sounds, I have to figure out what the voice of this character is going to be. Everything else is kind of like generic, the whooshes and the Foley, the sound that they make when they move, the footsteps, the hits, right?
Yeah.
But it kind of comes down to the voice of the character. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm not going to use like human type voices, what else can I use? And like I said, pigs, bears, hippopotamuses.
Okay. So in other words, when the character is actually talking, it could be speaking on the screen and then you see what, I think you guys in that game have a little window that shows you the written dialogue.
Yes.
For a conversation, right? And so but the character could be speaking while it's writing out that dialogue, and that could be like the grunt sounds of the pig or the bear.
Well, usually if there's something like that, I like to do actual like human style vocalizations, or actually if I have the budget, I would do actual VO voiceovers.
But I mean, what if it's so is it actually speaking the words in English? I mean, I'm trying to like visualize what you say when you say like bears and, grunts and things like that versus somebody speaking.
That would be more the monsters. The ones, the creatures that don't really speak.
Right.
beyond the grunts and whatnot.
All right.
The action noises.
Now, do you have ways to morph unusual sounds with actual human voices so that a monster can have like a super low voice that sounds different than a person just speaking in a, because if I do the bear voice, I'll start coughing.
Yes, we have ways to do that. I have more plugins than I would ever need.
What are some ones that are really useful? Like, what are some ones that you would go to morph a sound or morph a voice like that?
Pitch shifting, modulation, like filter modulation, like Filter Freak 2.
Mm-hmm.
Reverbs, were sometimes reverse reverbs, sometimes even printing out. Sometimes like I'll actually like get a sound with a really large reverb and print out the whole thing with the reverb tail. And then I could take that wave that I created and then reverse it and then use it for like a whisper coming into something.
Right, like a preverb.
Exactly. But it's a little more control. I've tried using a lot of reverb and kind of stuff, but I have more fun, I guess, doing it on my own.
All right, I'm going to try it out right here. Jay. Like that?
Exactly. Whisper, you know.
Yeah, whisper. Nice.
I've spent many time in my closet over the past couple of years just doing, you know.
Oh, so is that the mic that you're joining us on right now? Is that one that you would use for voiceover stuff in your own studio?
Yes.
And what are you using?
It's a Baby Bottle Blue.
Okay. All right. Cool. Awesome. Let's see what else. Let's get you talking a little bit about being in a band. We didn't really talk much about that. Share some stories about being in an early touring band. Do you have any fun anecdotes you want to share from your Enormous Richard days?
Does it have to be safe for work?
Nope. No. This is a rock and roll podcast.
So one of my favorite stories, it actually involves you.
Oh, nice. Bring it.
We played at Cleveland, Ohio. We opened up for Shadowy Man on a Shadowy Planet. Was that the name of the band? They did
right.
The Kids in the Hall theme.
That's right. They did.
The tour started awfully. The tour started with the van breaking down.
Classic tour story.
We all ended up in cars, and you were one of the drivers.
That's right, because I showed up in my silver Ford Escort station wagon. Like the entire thing was spray painted silver.
Yes. And you and I were hanging out on this in the beginning of this trip. So this is like the beginning of the tour. This is the tour that Chris broke his foot.
Oh, that's right. Catching a football in the parking lot.
Before we went to Walden's Pond.
Yeah, right before we met up with Nyemakuma.
Yes.
Oh man, so many stories. There's, I will say this: Chris and I have threatened to start a new podcast where we just tell stories about our old travel days and being in a band and stuff. So Rockstars, heads up for that. It might be out by the time this comes out. We might start that one, but
that'll be fun.
All right, so we were in Cleveland.
We were in Cleveland. We just played. We had to be. For some reason, I'm thinking we played the CBG. We had to be at the CBGBs the next night, and that's not like the quickest drive. I'm kind of fuzzy on that.
Well, Cleveland, Ohio to New York that's a long stretch.
Yeah. I'm kind of fuzzy if it was the CBGBs or if it was the place on St. Mark's Street that we would play.
Oh, yeah. No, that was it. It was the Continental Divide.
Continental Divide.
Because that was also the time where I parked my car on the side of the road, and during the gig, somebody smashed my windows and stole my rollerblades and my cassettes. They stole my cassettes, man.
Oh, I remember that. That's right. When I think of your car problems, I just think of the time your car was stolen out in front of the Marconi house.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother story. So that's what I was going to try and remember too. But finish your Cleveland story, and then that's what I wanted to remember is that you played on Walker with his head down when we went in and did that record for 2 weeks.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So we were in Cleveland, and we just packed everything up, and I want to say you had some Zappa tapes, so we were getting ready to listen to some Zappa on the way out. This is like right when I first started getting into Zappa, and we kind of had that discussion.
Baby snakes.
But we weren't prepared for this tour chemically. And we met somebody out on the street as we were loading the car who wanted to sell us a couple of joints. Do you remember this?
Maybe. Keep going.
You and I pooled our money together and bought a couple of joints.
Awesome.
And we left, and we decided to, break into one of them. And it was the first time I ever smoked couch stuffing.
I totally remember. I forgot that was the story, but I completely remember a time in my life where we unrolled a joint to see what it was. And it literally was like the stuffing from a couch cushion. It was just, but not like the nice white foam, like the couch cushions back when they used to make them out of like, donkey hair and straw, right, and, old wires and stuff like that. Oh man, that must have been the same tour where I met up with you guys at the Moon or something like that in New Haven, Connecticut. And in order to sneak up on Scoob and say hi, because I hadn't seen you guys yet on the tour, I was surprising you mid-tour. I bought a glow-in-the-dark Skeletor mask at the wall, whatever the pharmacy was, and I wore that as I crossed the street and like went up and got in his face, and he was freaking out.
I totally remember that. I remember you playing the melodica with that mask on.
Oh yeah, right. Well, when I saw you guys playing that show, and Rockstars, thanks for your patience as we just go down reminiscing alley here. But you guys were really dialed in as a band at that point. And I had been gone for a year traveling to Hong Kong and playing blues with my brother. And then I had come back and, was so excited to reunite with you guys, with the band. I mean, I didn't have any intention of joining the band again yet at that point. I just wanted to see everybody. But you guys had spent a year playing really seriously and getting to a point of being a really, really like rock solid show band. And you had your show dialed in, and I went and I saw you guys in New Haven play this show, and I just couldn't believe it. It was the tightest thing ever, and the songs were just awesome. And Chris Best was still playing in the band with you guys, playing accordion. And despite Chris and my differences on the stage sometimes, he was a super talented guy, still is. I mean, I haven't seen him in ages, but really, really talented musician and great comedian. And Chris King singing was, he was a real showman at that point too. He was really at the top of his game. So it was fun to reconnect with you guys. And that has a whole lot to do with me being here today, 30 years later, because I just had no desire to go back and be an architect. I just thought playing in a band was the most fun thing you could possibly do in the world. Right.
I mean, if it wasn't for those experiences, I definitely would not be where I am right now either. That was one of the highlights of my life, was that whole time period.
Well, dude, I mean, easily. We forgot to mention this, but of course, you also, eschewed your original education because you trained to be a clown.
I was waiting for that to come up.
And then you ended up, who knew that you were going to be just clowning around on a podcast instead one day?
I think that was how I that was the extent of my audition into Enormous Richard. It wasn't even my playing. It was, oh, you're a clown? You're in.
You're in. Yeah. That's the way all band, auditions should go. Well, very cool, man. Well, that's super fun. So now, of course, fast forward, and here you've done all kinds of stuff in game creation, sound design, and composition. Maybe when you were playing an Enormous Richard, you didn't have any, games didn't even exist then. Online didn't even exist yet.
Right.
But, here we are, and you've somehow managed to finagle together a career with this. Talk a little bit about that. What do the rock stars need to know if they're interested in sound design or composition in games? What does a career like that look like? How do you make a living doing something like that? What's a good place to start? What's a bad place to start?
I would say the bad place to start is starting as a music composer. Everyone, there's so many music composers out there. It's really oversaturated, and it's really tough to get into the industry and get like a consistent job. I know a few composers that have done it, and they're awesome. You want to get in first.
How do you mean? You mean like get in doing something else first and then find your opportunities to do the composition?
Yes. Like I'm coming at it this way because this is the way I did it.
Yeah, that's fine.
In 2004, when I moved out here, I actually had a plan to work for Sony Online Entertainment, which is what Darkpaw was back then. And I knew that I was going to go work there because I was playing their games and I had friends that worked there. And I wanted to get into sound design back then. Even though I had no idea what sound design was, I was just like, I'm a musician. I've been in studios. I can do this.
Nice.
And learned really quickly that it wasn't that easy to kind of get into that. But it was easy to get into quality assurance. And what quality assurance is you pretty much, you're a game tester. And by doing it that way, I got in and I learned how games were built. I learned how the industry worked. I started talking to sound designers. I started talking to other designers, and I hate this word. I started networking. And because of that, I had built relationships, and eventually I talked to one of the sound design managers, and he was like, hey, you wanted to be a sound designer way back when. You still want to do it. And the reason he gave me the opportunity was because I knew the games really well because I've been working on them forever. I knew how the process worked to build the games. And I knew everyone there. And he knew that I had already had this music background, and I've been in the studio and whatnot. And he knew he could teach me what I needed to know.
Yeah. So
it made it easy for me to transition into it. I have known people that you set out and you go for broke, and I'm going to be a sound designer, and you can that will work. But it's kind of like being a DJ or really anything in music. Be prepared to move.
Right.
be prepared to, you're going to have to give up a lot of things to really get into it that way.
Yeah. Well, it's so fascinating because I had no idea about any of this stuff. But like I said, a few years back, you came to my studio in Nashville and we worked on a Sean McGovern record together. And called Moonshine, which I'll include a link to that, Rockstars, in the show notes too. And then, during that time, I discovered that, wait a minute, what do you mean you're out in LA doing, game music composition and sound design? That's cool as shit. So it's really fun to hear that about you and discover that. And it's taken us a minute to get you finally on the podcast, but I'm really psyched that you're here, man.
Thanks.
What are some of your favorite things about it? Like what's your favorite part about doing what you do?
I get to do music and sound as a job. Everything I've done as a hobby for the last 20, 30 years, I am now doing it as a career. I found my niche, I guess. I love that. I love that I can take something with no sound. I could take a blank character or a blank, like a blank area that the players are in, and then I get to add all the sounds to it and kind of add to its character. I love taking something that's blank and then doing something to it and looking at it going, wow, that works.
Nice, man. Speaking of working, I think we can begin to start hearing the building getting constructed next door to you there. So Rockstars, if you hear anything in the background, it's just sometimes they're doing construction out the window. What are you going to do, you know? Do you want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Do you want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro-sounding mix that won't take years to learn, the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of creating a great sounding mix, then register for my free course Mixmaster Bundle to get great mixes using simple free plugins. And get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR at checkout to get 10% off any course for a limited time. Well, that's fun, dude. And you know, I guess I didn't really finish talking to you about your studio, but is it the kind of thing where, like, how important are headphones while you're working on what you do? How important are the speakers? Do you have like big ass fancy speakers, or do you have something that's much more like what somebody's going to be playing when they're, you know, just playing a game at home? Any thoughts about accurately hearing what you're doing while you're working so that your finished product is just the way you want it?
I like to be accurate. I use headphones as kind of a finishing, when I'm in my polishing stage, I'll use my headphones. But as I'm designing, I try not to use my headphones because my ears can only take so much. And it's one of those things, especially like when in other games, when I've done like Gunfire and things like that, it's mixing drums plus.
Yeah, you're just beating yourself up all day.
But the polishing side of it, when you're kind of getting into carving out the frequencies or carving out your space, I like to have the headphones on. I use studio monitors. I use a stereo setup here in my home studio, which is a couple of JBL 8 inches. Mm-hmm. At my studio at work, I have a full 5.1 sound setup. Not that I actually design in 5.1 for either of these games. I have designed it for previous games in 5.1 in the past. And that's always fun.
How hard was it to set up that 5.1 setup? Did somebody else do that for you professionally? Or did you just take speakers and just kind of place them yourself until that felt about right and that's all you needed to worry about?
It was kind of my initiation to becoming a sound designer. They said, you can have the sound design job, but you have to come up and set up your 5.1 system. And I was like, I've never done that before. And they're like, well, you're going to learn.
Nice.
So I set it up and I worked with 2 really great guys, Gary Miranda and Mark McBride. They totally took me under their wing and taught me everything. And they're actually running their own sound design company now, doing really well. Mark McBride is a great composer also on his own.
Awesome.
But they both took me under their wing and taught me everything. And that day I happened to work with Gary and he kind of talked me through things. I retained some of it. I actually have to go in and set up my system now because they just moved buildings about 6 months ago and I never set up my 5.1 system. So I still have to go in and set it up again. So maybe ask me this question the next time.
All right, cool. What about the keyboard controller? You mentioned maybe you did say how many keys it was, but is there a certain length of keyboard that we want to make sure we have if we're going to even consider this stuff? Like, you don't want to end up with something too small, or can you get away with a little small keyboard?
You could get away with a smaller keyboard, but you're going to want the extra room. I use a 66 key. I would love to have an 88 key. Obviously, an 88 key takes up a lot more space.
Yeah,
it's like so like the piano. Right. So the 66 key is perfect, and I can I have like switches that I can octave it if I need to or whatnot. Honestly, if you have 3 to 4 octaves of keys, you're pretty good to go with composing. If you can, as long as you can transpose them down and whatnot.
And if I recall, what you said is it's helpful to sort of start with the piano sound first, where you're just playing the chords and you can, play a left hand and a right hand until you like the feel of it. But then you start dissecting that into individual instruments, or would those piano chords find their way all the way to the finished composition?
Yes and no. That's one of the ways I kind of start stuff with the piano. Depending, sometimes I need to get out of my box, and I'll switch instruments. Okay, I'm going to write this lead using an oboe because it's going to be different and get me into a different mindset. When I start with piano, sometimes the piano will make its way all the way through, but I would say 75% of the time it'll get transposed into other instruments, and a lot of times even changed. Like if I've got a chord pattern that has a melody built into it, sometimes I'll realize that I can switch that melody out to different instruments to get a different feel.
Yeah. And would that be something as simple as looking at the Midi track of the piano and then seeing the melodic notes and just grabbing them and dragging them up to another track for a different instrument?
Yes, it's kind of one of the things I do for sure.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. Well, let me jump into our closing jam session questions before we're done here. And we'll just kind of rock through these things. So when you started out in recording, what do you feel like was holding you back?
Myself, my confidence. When it comes to recording, you just gotta get over thinking that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And use your ear. Just use your ear to start with, and then start learning things from there. If it sounds bad, it's probably bad.
That's good advice. People are always talking about if it sounds good, it is good. And it's a lot of times the frustration is man, I never get it to the point of it sounding good. So I like your reverse advice, which is if it sounds bad, then it probably is.
It's with songwriting. Are you ever really finished?
Dude, I barely get started. Oh, man. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've done a song and then I write it and then I record it and I finally get it to all the places I want. And then I go back and listen. And then I noticed that I had a stupid lyric choice right in the middle. Then I'm like, why did I do that? I should have done this instead,
Oh, totally. Well, I'm in the process of getting all our music, all the game music into some Spotify playlists. And I'm listening to the stuff I did last year, and I'm going to end up spending time on it, remixing it, just because of the things I hear.
Nice, man.
So no, stuff's never done.
How portable is your rig? Can you pick up your rig and go to a different studio to mix it if you wanted to?
I could. It's relatively portable. In fact, next week I am going on a cabin camping trip in the desert that the cabin actually has power, and I actually take all my gear and I spend the whole week by myself just writing. Wow. And it's portable enough for that, but it's still kind of a pain in the butt. I could get this down to a laptop pretty easily. Mm-hmm. I just recently, my libraries are now very portable. My libraries are actually on a 2 terabyte SSD external drive. So I can take my libraries really anywhere I want. So I guess in that case, everything is portable as long as I have a machine powerful enough to be able to run Reaper and Contact and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that a lot when I'm chatting with OWC too, about the importance of having an external SSD that is super fast, because then you can easily just load up and carry a library with you and plug it in. And you have to have a fast drive too if you want it, the player to recall it and pull the samples that quickly.
Right. Well, like we were talking earlier, before it took me 15 minutes to load a song. Now it takes me 5 minutes.
It's still so funny because 5 minutes is still forever. But I remember when, back in the day, it used to take so long. It would take like 15 minutes just to restart the computer.
Yeah.
And we talked about all the times Pro Tools would crash on us. And like, we calculated that we were losing like days every year of just sitting there and watching the computer start in the studio.
When I started in sound design, I was actually on an Apple using Pro Tools. And there were things that were taking, I'm trying to remember what it was. There was some render that it was just taking me forever to render these sound files. And I started an Excel sheet and started calculating how much time I was just sitting there looking at it. And it was maddening.
Started an Excel sheet. All right. How about some of the best advice you remember receiving on your recording journey? Best
advice, using your ears. Sometimes the best note is no note at all. Again, if it sounds bad, it probably, if you think it sounds bad, it probably does to you.
All right. How about a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something the rock stars could use on their next session? And, anything kind of fun, any fun new trick that you've been excited about as far as sound design, composition?
Oh, this is it's almost mundane, but brass, you can manipulate brass as far as EQ any way you want, and it'll always sound like brass.
Oh, that's a great tip, man.
So if brass, if you write a composition with a lot of low brass and suddenly your output's like pushing more LFUs than you really need, you can take those out, just go in and edit, carve out the frequencies out of your brass, and you still sounds like brass.
Okay, speaking of which, you're talking about like the volume, the loudness of your stuff. How much of a part of your workflow is it to get what you're doing at a certain loudness? And, the mixing aspect, I guess.
It's a big part. It's a big part of the polish and editing side of it, the very last part. Because everything needs to, I don't have, in our games, there isn't any kind of volume regulation. There's no volume normalization going on.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of times the music is mixed way down low in the game too, right?
Well, yes.
Or can be.
It can be. Everyone in their options for their games, there's separate volume sliders for music, so people can mix their music volume any way you want. So I always try to get as high as I can, based off of everything else in the zone, the area. So there's ambient atmosphere. Sometimes there's wind. I use a lot of tonal kind of stuff in my ambience, and I need to make sure that all that is mixed well with the volume of the song, with the music. And then after that, it's just up to the players if they how loud they want to hear the songs.
You mean they can just sit there? There's like a preference setting where they can turn the music up or down in the game, that sort of thing?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you approve of that?
Yes, I actually do. As a gamer, sometimes music is just way louder than it needs to be, or it gets distracting. So I like to cut it down in half. But sometimes I like the music. Sometimes the music is just so great that I want to hear it.
And does the game have the music, naturally swell up in certain sections? Are there times where, you finish a section and it automatically cranks up the music, like in the way that a movie would make a big deal out of a particular scene?
Unfortunately, our games do not do that.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I wish they did.
Fair enough. Maybe that's some of the future tech too.
Yes.
What about the opportunities for you to gather with other composers and other sound designers? Are there conferences? Are there events that you go to? Are there communities that you're a part of that are really important to you?
There are conferences you can go to and events. There's game conferences that you can go to. There's a few like sound design and music composition conferences. I've been to one in LA it was kind of eye-opening. I went to it with the idea of I wanted to learn more about sound design, and I ended up learning more about music composition. There's Facebook groups. I'm kind of active, and I'm not active in any of them, to be honest. I just kind of fly on the wall, watch. Your group I watch too. I've actually learned a lot from
right
some
on.
of the stuff that Rockstars has posted.
Right on.
Yeah. So there are. I can't think of anything off the top of my head because, like I said, I'm not necessarily very active in them.
Okay.
I personally know people. We get together and we hang out. Pre-pandemic, we would have like beer Fridays, like where a bunch of us would get together and hit up some brewery or whatnot and just talk. I talk to some of my closer friends that I've worked with a little more often, but not as often as I wished.
That's great. Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free." All right, well, how about a favorite hardware tool for the studio? Something physical that you like always having when you're composing sound design sessions?
The Keith McMillan Bop Pad.
What in the world is that? The Keith McMillan Bop Pad.
It is a MIDI controller, a four-section MIDI controller, kind of like a drum pad that I can totally assign anything to. And it's one of the coolest things I've bought myself for composing. As far as like doing percussion or anything like that, it helps me get more of a human feel.
Very cool. I think I remember that. What didn't they start that? Unless he's done a bunch of these as a crowd source, like a Kickstarter kind of thing.
I think this was a Kickstarter at first,
and then there's soft pads that become controllers, but they also have almost like rainbow colored LED lighting behind them, so they can really change the lighting. And you can slide up and down with like faders or sliders, or spin, or can you rotate them too?
Mine's there are those out there, but mine's not. The one that I have isn't mine actually just looks like a practice drum pad.
Okay. But it's got 4 different sections on it?
It's 4 different sections. I can control the intensity, I control almost every aspect of it. So I can like play it with my hands. I can play it with sticks. I can play it with mallets.
Very cool. So it just makes it really easy to be expressive for the percussion kind of stuff. Okay, awesome, man. All right, great. How about a favorite software tool or something you're excited about?
I love Reaper. Honestly, I don't use a whole lot of software tools beyond Reaper. I use New Window for my sound design.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about? I really don't want to talk about New Window because I really don't understand how it works. New Window
it's all right.
so tough.
But you mentioned plugins too, and I meant to ask you, when it comes to plugins, you quickly referenced that you really liked the Sound Toys Little Plate plugin, which is a great one. What are some of the most, without not necessarily brand specific, unless you want to, but like the most common reverb styles that you might use? Like, do you find that hall reverbs are the most useful to you, or that plate reverbs are the most useful to you, or does none of that stuff matter?
It's context. If I'm doing ambience, I love the darker hall reverbs. When it comes to characters, I like to use more plate reverbs, kind of dialed back.
Meaning shortened. When you say dialed back, you mean short?
Yeah, shortened. Or I use ambient reverbs. Ambient reverbs? Am I getting that right?
You mean like short, like small spaces, like rooms?
Yeah.
Just to give it a sense of place. Okay, cool. So how about sharing a resource for the business side of doing what you do? If somebody wants to, you started to talk about this already, but if somebody wants to do music composition and game sound design do it professionally instead of staying in the land of hobby.
Talk to other sound designers. It's funny. In the last 6 months, I've been hit up 3 times now on LinkedIn. People kind of asking me, how do I get in? And I think that at this point is like the best way to do it is talk to someone that's already in. If you don't know someone that's already in, use like LinkedIn or like whatever social media that you're comfortable with, and find people that are in it, and ask them like how to get in.
And then let me reverse that question. If you do want to start out doing it as a hobby first, are there opportunities for somebody to do sound design and music composition for game stuff non-professionally?
Sure. Music composition, certainly. A lot of gaming companies don't have in-house music composers. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an outsourcing thing at this point. So because of that, I think people could probably get into music composing that way pretty, not easily, but that is a larger opportunity because you can do your composition at home and then get it up on the interwebs and people can hear it and they know what you can do. It's kind of different from sound design, mm-hmm. where you have to like build a reel, if I were to start auditioning, if I started interviewing for other sound design jobs, I would build a audio visual reel of my work.
Yeah. So maybe break that down for us. Like, let's say somebody's saying, I really want to try doing sound design. What do they need? Do they just need a video with no sound on it, and then they just sort of recreate the Foley for that video, and that would be part of a reel, for example?
Yes. So sound design, a perfect way to do that is sometimes just find game footage on YouTube, strip out the sound, and add your own sounds.
Nice.
I mean, there's other more complex ways to do it, but that's one of the easiest ways to do it. For music composition, and I should have brought this up earlier, there's so many silent movies out there that are not copywritten anymore. Pick one of those and compose sound and music to it.
That's a great idea. Great tip. Because otherwise you don't want to get flagged for trying to take copyrighted stuff.
Right. Faust, the 1937 version, black and white, well, obviously black and white silent version of Faust's Dante's Inferno, just the copyright, it's not copywritten anymore as of this year. So as a practice, I'm actually taking that. I'm going to try to compose music to it, but that's more practice. That's cool, how I practice.
That's great. I love that tip. That's a great one. Because I think if you were just trying to think about how to get started, really wouldn't know where to go. I mean, in my brain, I was imagining, do we have to find somebody who's making a game who will let me make sounds for it? And that's the wrong way to think of it. Just go make sounds for video.
Yeah, find a video out there. There are ways, like if you really want to learn how everything works, one of the big gaming engines that we don't use, but it's Unreal. It's free to download and it's free to learn how to use. And you can learn how to build games with that and then do your own sound in the game. In fact, the tutorial for how to use Unreal, I've seen people use the tutorial as their reel.
Nice.
Like they just do the tutorial, add their sounds, create their game, and then poof, they have their reel.
That's cool. That sounds like a lot of fun. I don't know where I'm going to personally find the time right now, but maybe one of these days I'll be like, now's the time. I'm going to finally learn how to make some fun game stuff. But that's very cool. And that's definitely a feature of, being in the future here. 2022 is that you could just go download something like that, run it, start creating the game elements and the sound and everything. All right. Well, so let's go to this question. How about an organizational resource, whether it's online or just a method that you do? How do you keep all your shit together and organized? You must have an enormous amount of stuff that you can't lose track of.
For my composition, I use Google Forms. For the game side of it, we have tons of software and tools that help us. There's one big giant system that's like the truth and knowledge, and everything goes into that system. And it keeps everything organized and tracked as far as all the different parts of the game, including sound and music.
But what was the Google Forms part? What do you mean by that?
The Google Forms Excel. I'm not sure what
the Google Sheets. Google Sheets.
The Google
spreadsheet.
Sheets.
Yeah.
That's what I use to keep my compositions organized.
So what does that mean to you? Does that mean you've got a bunch of different compositions you have to do and you're just keeping track of which versions and you've done and what needs to get done next kind of thing, like a checklist style?
A checklist style. I keep track of the keys, the tempos, the lengths, in case I need to change something up sometimes. That way I know I can look at it at a glance. I don't want to if I have to reference, I don't want to have to load a song just to reference something like that.
Right.
So I just keep track of all that in Excel sheets.
Right. Good point. Because if it takes 5 minutes to 15 minutes to load the song, you don't have to do all that just to press play and find out what the tempo was and stuff.
Right.
Okay, cool. Good tip, man. All right. Well, then let's go to our closing question. This one is hypothetical. And we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you're going to go back in time and find young Jay. Don't be a clown. Quit clowning around, young Jay. You want to do music. So if you could go back and tell yourself one thing and you say, listen, I've come back to give you this bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and tell yourself if you could?
Don't wait for opportunities. Find them.
Nice. I make my own luck.
I mean, I spent a lot of time waiting around. Young Jay spent a lot of time waiting around.
Nice, man. No longer. Well, dude, it's been awesome hanging with you, man. Thanks for coming and doing this. I know you feel slightly put on the spot by this, but you were great and you shared. I mean, for us, it's really awesome to have you open the door to this world for us a little bit, just so that we can see what it's all about. It's very cool. I certainly grew up on video games. I don't play them now like I used to, although I did just buy a game controller for my Tesla because just because you can.
Just because you can, right?
And then I played a game for a minute and I was like, okay, I'm going to put this in the drawer. But, it's very cool. And I've always been a big fan of games and I just think it's cool, man. So let the rock stars know how they can find you online. Where would you like them to connect with you? What if they've got any questions for you or anything like that, how should somebody find out more about you or contact you?
I would say, if anything, look me up on LinkedIn. I think it's just LinkedIn and Jay Lauterwasser.
LAUTERWASSER, Rockstars.
There you go. Because Facebook, I don't really pay attention to Facebook. You can try to catch me on Twitter, but I try not to pay attention to social media too much, I guess.
Yeah. No, LinkedIn's a good place for just connecting and communicating with people. Although I personally don't use it enough.
Yeah, I don't either. But yeah, LinkedIn seems to be where people tend to like hit me up with questions and whatnot. And I have no problems helping out there.
That's awesome. And then a reminder, Rockstars, we have a SoundCloud playlist in the show notes too. So please click through and go listen to it. And better yet, just go to EverQuest.com, I think it is, and you can go check out the game and download it yourself. Is it something where you can just play it for free to start and check it out, or how does it work? That'll work. Okay, cool.
Yeah. There's perks if you want to subscribe, of course, with anything, but yeah, you can. It's free to play.
And will that work on a Mac or a PC, or like, is this a game you can play on? Oh, just PC. Okay,
just PC. Yeah.
All right, there you go. That answers that question. Dude, well, thanks so much for hanging with us, man. It's great to hang with you again, and I'm looking forward to the next record we get to make. Anything you're working on now that you want people to be on the lookout for musically?
Roger, we're currently recording our next album. We're hoping to release it on vinyl by the middle of the summer.
Awesome, dude. Well, I look forward to hearing that too. Well, I'll see you around the studio, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Lidge. This was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. And thanks for listening, Rockstars.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Later.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible: OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to access many of their plugins. At Sampley.app, sign up for a free account with 2 projects now, and later use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you upgrade to a pro account. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. You will find links to all these awesome sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in our next episode. Cheers.